Okay, well, good evening, everyone. We are at a Curriculum and Evaluation Committee meeting of the National Board of Education. It is Monday, March the 20th. It's 5:30. We're in the School Administration Building. So I guess we'll start with the roll call.
Dr. Murataki.
I'm here.
Mr. Kaufman.
Here.
Mrs. Van Twyver.
Here.
And I'm here. We also have Mr. Boucher and
Lisa Janicic, middle school STEM coach.
okay.
We'll be providing an update on the science standards.
Okay. And what
And
else?
Mr. Holloway.
Mary Ann Dustin.
Oh, okay, Mary Ann Dustin.
Who will be doing machining and manufacturing Algebra 1 pilot, which sounds very exciting.
Did you get Mr. Hallowell?
Oh, Mr. Hallowell too.
Also in attendance.
Also here, yeah.
Okay. And for the record, the voting members today will be myself, Mr. Kaufman, and Ms. Van Twyver as the voting quorum. Okay, well, so Mr. Boucher, would you like to introduce?
Yes, I'd like to
speakers?
introduce Lisa Janicic, who has been faithfully tracking the progress of the state science standards and volunteered to provide an update on what's been happening in science.
Is it possible to pop off?
Are you plugged in?
I am plugged in, and I should be off.
Hold on. Anu also in attendance.
Oh, also we have Mr. Farrington.
Board president.
One by one.
See it slowly coming into
It's coming up.
focus.
Yep.
Should we kill the light?
Or
I think
Yeah.
it'll become stronger.
All right.
Better?
So as Mr. Boucher had mentioned, I am here to give you an update on what has been happening at the state level with science education. Just to give you a little bit of a background, I think I've probably spoken with the Curriculum and Evaluation Committee before, coming through with science curriculum. I was a classroom middle school science teacher for 7 years, and for the past 2 years, I've held the position of a peer curriculum coach at the middle school level. I attended the public forum on the Next Gen Science Standards in Hudson, and Dr. Murataki was there, as well as Sandra Zine. I've attended a workshop that was given by Barbara Hopkins. She is the New Hampshire Director of Science Education at the Department of Education. She was also the speaker for the public forum that was in Hudson. And I've also had the opportunity to work with Barbara and 60-plus educators from around the state, ranging from kindergarten up through college level for pre-service teachers. This is the year that science teacher credentialing is under review, so that does not impact any in-service teacher at this point. It's always a do no harm situation. They have their credentials in science. This would actually affect teachers that are going to be coming into the profession of teaching as they go through the college level, or any teachers that would take an alternative route, alternative 4 or 5 towards certification. So the checklist of competencies and skills, knowledge that they need is going to be tweaked a little bit. And I would say the information that is going before the credentialing board and the suggestions are that the wording is changing to that next gen 3-dimensional learning, having an understanding of science and engineering practices and cross-cutting concepts. I just put that kneecap piece down there because I did not want to forget. This spring is the final science kneecap. That is a definite. I know for a while there we were thinking, you know, oh gee, is it going to be another year? Is it going to be another year? This is going to be the final year. And they are in the process of evaluating a new assessment, and they are working with other states in the Northeast up here. Just like the NECAP was a group of northern states, the new assessment, just because there's a lot more pull when you have multiple states with a larger population now.
But doesn't it make sense to have a replacement in hand, tested and accepted before you decide to end something? Isn't it premature?
Not really, because the idea is you do have to have an end and you do have to have a beginning. And once they do roll that out, the initial scores that come back, they really aren't going to be counted. It would be a pilot if that assessment is going out for the first time. The same way that the NECAP had started way back in, I think, 2007. There was actually a small pilot test that had gone out where students from across the state could take that assessment before they actually rolled out that first NECAP test.
But it doesn't sound as though they're doing that this time?
They are evaluating a new assessment, and when it does get rolled out, it would be as a pilot.
Okay, so I'm just struggling with that because
Mm-hmm.
in the non-academic, in the real world, you would keep what you've got, you run a pilot, you test it, you refine it, and when you're happy with what you've got, then you roll it out. So here, it's like we're ending something, we're going to maybe figure out what we're going to replace it with, and then when we figure out what we might replace it with, we'll pilot it, give it to everybody, throw away the results for a year, and then start new. And I just...
So I think your understanding may change
Yeah.
once we go
Okay.
through this, and I think that if you have those questions, if you can keep them to the end.
Sure, I'll be happy to.
I do know, I actually have a graduate class at 7 o'clock that I have
Okay.
to scoot out to.
Yep.
So if I can't...
We could always follow up.
Yeah, if I can't answer your questions, you're going to have my email. You can always
Okay,
get a hold of
thank
me,
you.
and I will come, okay?
Just
Yep.
quickly, though, to address Mr. Kaufman's point, I think that you should just hold on to your horses.
Fine. Okay.
Because there are a number of states that rolled out, you know, like if you look at Common Core, like Massachusetts decided retroactively that they needed to have a 2-year overlap period between Park and MCAS.
Mm-hmm.
New York had a 5-year overlap between Park and the New York Regencies. So I think the experience of other states has been that overlaps are in fact useful for exactly the reasons that he stated. So let's hold on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So a packet was given to you last week, and I thought that I would just give you a quick overview of what is in your packet. I don't intend on going through this packet step by step. I put it together with the idea that some of the pieces were a very quick reference to give you a little more information, and then as you get further into the packet, it's a little more in-depth to give you more information. And you can always go to the Next Generation site and pick up these documents and other supporting documents. So your first 2 pages were a very nice overview of what they are, why they're important, how they were developed, where they came from. To give you a quick overview, the same body developed the Next Generation Science Standard that influenced the state frameworks that were developed in 2006. This is AAAS, and it's the National Research Council. So those bodies influenced what we had as our 2006 New Hampshire standards. Those are the same bodies specifically the New Hampshire Research Council and their frameworks for K to 12 that influence the writing of the next generation science standards. So those are things that you'll be able to look at on your own if you haven't had the opportunity. On page 3, this is a very nice, and I don't have it up there, but I know that you have it in front of you. It's just a very quick, what a science classroom is going to look like, how it would change. What we see now, what we would see in the future. The next piece I'll actually reference later on in this PowerPoint. It's actually an overview for principals, so administrators. So I thought that it might be helpful for you as members of the Board of Education because the support comes from administrators and the support comes from you. So for you to understand the vision that this is a long-term goal. It's not a matter of pulling the rug out from under teachers. It would take 3 to 5 years to fully implement these standards. So it isn't that stop one thing and start the other. There has to be that gradual change in teaching practice for it to become apparent in the classroom. And if you think of it that way, we would want that initial assessment to be a pilot because it's going to take a while for those classrooms to change. They're still going to be getting their science content, but it's how it's delivered and the engagement that you get from the students. So this is something that we'll look at later on. The next piece was the executive summary and the introduction. That's something that if you're willing to sit down and spend a little more time, it lays out the information from those fact sheets that I gave you, and that might be helpful. And then I did add a copy of the newsletter that is available to anyone that would sign up. It comes electronically. It's usually 7 things that you should know about Next Gen, and it gives you information about it, and teachers would have access to that as well. So the thing with the Next Gen Science Standards, and I'm sure that you've heard this before, is that it's 3-dimensional learning. Right now, our New Hampshire frameworks are very content-based. That's the way I came into teaching, and I know from a teaching standpoint that it's always going to be very easy to go back to that. But standing up in the front of the room and trying to pour facts and information into a student, that's not science. You have to be doing science. You know, the children have to be engaged. They have to be able to change their way of thinking for them to learn. And if they aren't thinking to begin with, if you just have that dull face in front of you because they aren't actively pursuing science, then you're not going to get a change in that knowledge. So they have to be thinking to begin with. One of these 3 dimensions is the science and engineering practices. There are 8 of them. I have a feeling that some of these are familiar to you. Certainly asking questions in science or defining problems if it's engineering, so the Next Gen has a very strong STEM connection to it. Developing and using models, planning and carrying out investigations, analyzing and interpreting data, using mathematics and computational thinking, constructing explanations for science and designing solutions for engineering, engaging in argument from evidence, obtaining, evaluating, communicating information. You're going to look in there and you're going to say, wow, some of that stuff looks like that old scientific method that you learned so many years ago. And that is true, but anyone that is involved in science knows that it isn't necessarily a linear progression. The cross-cutting concepts are the second piece. There are 7 of them, and as I was looking at this earlier today, I started seeing the connections to other disciplines. I said cause and effect, stability and change, social studies those are major topics in social studies. And here we have a cross-curriculum connection because we have this in science as well. So cross-cutting concepts are those things that it doesn't matter which domain of science that you're teaching, these will apply. Now the question is, and this is more of where your update comes from, and I know Dr. Moritaki that is probably a familiar picture on the right-hand side because Barbara had that at the forum. And I'll explain exactly what that is in a moment. Basically, about 4 years ago, the New Hampshire Science Teachers Association had approved the Next Gen Science Standards, and they really encourage statewide adoption. So that's the association that many of the science teachers belong to. That's our state organization. We also have the National Science Teachers Association, the NSTA, and they also had adopted it long before the New Hampshire State Teachers Association did. In 2014, even though the Board of Ed hadn't officially adopted these standards, they had formed science competencies. And if you look at these competencies, they're actually the cross-cutting concepts, those 7 cross-cutting concepts of patterns, cause and effect, etc. In 2015, the New Hampshire Board of Ed voted to begin the process of using them statewide. They weren't saying that they had to be done. They were starting little pilots and giving those pilots some support. In 2016, this is where those public forums came in, which Dr. Murataki and Mrs. Zine had attended with myself. And in the same time, Barbara Hopkins had sent out a science learning inventory to teachers, parents, administrators, districts, and she had collected information. And this map on the right-hand side are the results of what she found throughout the state. So we have 102 districts in the state of New Hampshire. The light-colored green are districts that said that they are beginning to use the Next Generation Science Standards. And that's just not their list of disciplinary core ideas or just their science and engineering practices or their cross-cutting concepts. They are beginning that change in teaching practice to be able to engage their students in science. The darker green, they have advanced use of Next Generation Science Standards. The white parts, from my understanding, are districts that are very tiny and sort of send their students out to other districts or other schools. So they didn't get any response from those. The orange, you'll see that there are 2 of them, use the New Hampshire framework exclusively. And then the yellow, that there is some combination in there, that they may be using next gen wording, but they're making sure that the topics from the frameworks are being used, mainly because the kneecap is still in place. On November 3rd, I got to go to that meeting where the New Hampshire Board of Education adopted the Next Gen Science Standards. They named them the New Hampshire College and Career Ready Science Standards, but they are the Next Gen Science Standards. The electricity in that room was absolutely amazing. The board had already decided that they were going to approve these, and there were professors from colleges around the state. There were representatives from the National Science Teachers Association. There were representatives from the New Hampshire Science Teachers Association. There were administrators from districts spoke on behalf of the Next Gen Science Standards. This really was an organic, teacher-driven process. It wasn't something that the state had deemed necessary and put forward. They actually put a lot of time and effort into this. And as you can see from this map, there's a lot of light green and green there. This is what the science teachers had wanted. And on January 12th, the board actually approved a K-8 model science competencies. It's an extension of what they did in 2014, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing. Basically, they took the 7 cross-cutting concepts, and they also added the nature of science and engineering, because that spans your science and engineering practices, and it also spans your cross-cutting concepts. So the first competency is that, and then they do go on to be the 7 cross-cutting concepts. This is available at the Department of Education website. If you have a hard time finding it there, send me a quick email. I have a PDF of it, and I can certainly email it to anyone that's interested. Something that I like about this as a teacher, not only do they have the progression, K2, 3, 5, and 6, 8, but they have added the I can statements. And that would be the students' I can statements. And once again, those competencies are those 7 cross-cutting concepts, as well as the nature of science. Now, I know Mrs. Ziem had a concern that the state would say, okay, now we're doing next gen science standards, have a great time, and walk away. That isn't true. There is professional development out there. They intend on giving teacher and administrator training in what's called the EQUIP training, and that should be, I believe, a capital Q, I, and P, because it's actually an acronym for something much longer, to help them develop strong 3D learning opportunities. The EQUIP rubric actually helps you take lessons that you already have, and it's sort of something that you can go through and, does my lesson meet these standards? And if it meets the EQUIP rubric, then you know that it is aligned with the next gen science standards. So that professional development will be happening. ESSA money, so Every Student Succeeds Act, which came after the No Child Left Behind. The hope is that there would be monies there. And this is something that maybe not just for science, and I'm not sure if Mr. Boucher even knows this, that there's the potential for more of those pre-engineering monies. We know that our middle schools had gotten $15,000 each. They're hoping to extend that to K-6, so through those elementary schools. And I think that the figure was about $100,000. So grants to be able to use there. We certainly have open educational resources. The National Science Teachers Association is just full of free teacher resources. The Teaching Channel is also a very good resource. And then district support, we have a strong PLC collaborative going on where the teachers are very supportive of each other. Department meetings. We are hoping to pilot some new resources, at least at the middle school. The middle school resources are from 2005.
Define PLC.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's a professional learning community. Those are those times when teachers have common planning time and they can get together by grade level. They can examine student work. They can be looking at common assessments. They can be talking about lesson planning. They can actually visit each other's classrooms. So it's a very supportive atmosphere for teachers. Certainly there are workshops, and hopefully there would be out-of-district opportunities as well. So in your packet on that, the principles, on the second page of it, these are just some things that I want to draw your attention to, because this is what the teachers would need for support. So it's an overview for principals, and it's on the back sheet. I would say what really draws my attention is second bullet up from the bottom, be critical consumers of any new curricula. And I took that as certainly any new resources that we would be looking at. As well as seeking out professional learning for yourself. I mean, if you are not a science teacher and in the classroom actually, you know, up to your eyeballs in the next gen science standards, you really need to seek out that professional learning to deepen your understanding of what's going on. Common pitfalls, and if we are looking for a vision of hopefully having an implementation of 3 to 5 years down the road, you know, starting small, a lesson here, a lesson there, having the support of the teachers, it will take 3 to 5 years for this to happen. It can't happen overnight. If we try to have it happen overnight, we aren't going to be able to sustain it. You have to have that slow progression as we're going on. So thinking that the instruction is going to change overnight, it isn't going to happen. Certainly they can't do it alone. And another piece would be failing to communicate with parents and community about what is changing and why you are changing it. So just to recap, the Next Gen Science Standards, and I do have copies of this, so please don't feel that you have to scribble this all down, and I will gladly pass those out to you. These last 2 slides, I do have copies for you. The Next Gen Science Standards have been adopted as the New Hampshire College and Career Ready Science Standards, unadulterated. They took them as is. This is a statewide not as in ground up, but from the bottom up teacher initiative. It's not being mandated by the state. The state isn't going to come down saying that these have to be done, but you can see the direction of the state of New Hampshire. There will be professional development from the Department of Education and other opportunities based on a common vision. It will take 3 to 5 years to fully implement. NECAP will be gone for after the spring of 2017. There is a new science assessment based on Next Gen being evaluated by multiple northeastern states. New science teaching resources that we see out there, so if we do want to be able to pilot something, they are Next Gen based. New people that will be entering the science teaching profession, from what I've gathered from the Credentialing Review Board, they will be demonstrating the skills and knowledge of the Next Gen Science Standards. And so this is affecting our pre-service teachers and our alternative certification folks. Future-wise, I really think with a common goal, Nashua has the capacities to surpass any STEM or science school or district. I really think moving towards this complements the work that we've done at the middle school level with our pre-engineering. At the middle school level, during April and May, the teachers are getting together to view what resources are out there. We have 4 different dates with 4 different manufacturers, publishers, to come in so the teachers can actually see what is available out there. The hope is that we could pilot some of these resources next year. The nice thing about a pilot is that there is professional development that comes with it, and it's generally at no cost. We would be looking for input and support from the Board of Education as we vet these common resources. So as the end of next year closes, having someone on that committee that's going to help us go over that rubric and see which resource really would meet the needs of our teachers and our students would be very, very important. And we want to keep open communication with you. As the teacher understanding deepens, our teachers are on a wide spectrum, just like our students are. There are those that have been trying to deepen their understanding of the next-gen science standards. There are those that have just looked at the top and said, oh, well, you know, those aren't deep enough. Those are the people that don't have that understanding. They haven't had the time to be able to spend with the standards, have those conversations with people that have used them in their classrooms. And the teachers are going to have to learn, because this is a change in practice. I could see in the future, and this isn't immediate, because if it's going to take us 3 to 5 years to implement this, we wouldn't be revisiting our scope and sequence for a while, but I could see that happening. Right now, our scope and sequence is a list of topics. It's a list of Jeopardy questions in a way. And that's not what we want for our students. We want them to be able to problem solve and think, make claims, support those with evidence. We want them to become deeper thinkers. So the hope is that if we are able to have a pilot next year and we can vet the resources and we can come to something, having a common resource that isn't as content-based but gives us that three-dimensional learning. You know, I think it would be wonderful if we could have during the 2018-19 school year of having that common resource. I would say more at the middle school level because of the way science is being taught at the elementary school level. And I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but even though the standards say K to 12, I would say that's K up through their biology class in 10th grade. Their chemistry class, their physics class is an application of those standards. So there's that learning progression. It really goes to your physical science and your biology at the high school level with a very strong application, and these are a foundation to that application. And then AP classes at the science level, obviously that's under the umbrella of the College Board and exactly what would get taught at that point. Now, something that I'm really, really excited about is this Wednesday, it's early release. We had the opportunity to send one of our middle school science teachers to a workshop outside the district. It was an all-day workshop, and she left that workshop with an energy of, you know what, I can try something in my classroom. It wasn't scrap the whole thing. It was like, I just know in this next lesson that I want to be able to try something in my classroom. And I said, so if you're going to go to this workshop, are you going to be able to come back and share with the science teachers? And she goes, I would love that, but give me an opportunity to apply what I learned in my classroom. And she actually did that. And so she's going to give us, all the middle school science teachers, there's 25, a small workshop on implementing the next gen science standards in a classroom. And I'll tell you right now, just speaking to this teacher, she said, I knew about the next gen science standards. She was on our curriculum writing team. She was with us as we took the next gen science standards and our New Hampshire frameworks. And she said going to this workshop opened her eyes and gave her such a great understanding of how to implement this into the classroom. She actually designed a lesson to do that. She said her students were engaged. She had a great time. The students really learned. You could see from what they thought before, through the process, to the end result. And they were making models that weren't just models where you labeled something, but it actually explained the science phenomenon that was going on. And I really am excited to have her share this with the other science teachers. And I really think it just needs to be those baby steps. Do one thing in your classroom, and you're going to get energized yourself, just like your students are going to be energized. So I am looking forward to that on Wednesday. That's the update. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to email me, give me a call. If you do have an email from me, my cell phone number is right at the bottom of that. I would love to sit and speak to you about this, answer any questions that you have. And I get the opportunity in April to go back up to the Department of Ed to work more on the credentialing review.
So Lisa,
Yes.
how much time do you have for board member questions? I know you're in a
Yeah, no,
tight schedule.
I can probably be here until 6:30 because that would give me enough time to set up my computer and do my virtual meeting with you and Ian.
So do we have any questions from the board? Yes, Ms. Bentweiler.
I have a question about the assessment. You're going to stop the kneecap. And you also said that you'll be implementing this, it will take at least 5 years for implementation. And I'm not entirely sure what that totally means.
Okay.
What's the assessment going to look like each year?
All
Are we
right.
going to be comparing apples to oranges for the next so many years?
Well, in that sense, I can see it may have been easier for Nashua if we had embraced these science standards before. I'm not sure if they are going to roll out an assessment for 2018. They thought they would be able to do that, but it would be only as a pilot, just to see how it would work. At the time, the idea was that it would be no more than a 2-hour exam, that it would be more process-based and not content-based. So you're not going to get those Jeopardy questions. Basically, if they are given all the information and they can gather the data, if they're able to make a claim, support it with evidence, and make that connection of the evidence back to the claim, then they're going to do well. Because I always had that question as an 8th grade teacher. We always did the science kneecap in May. Well, I hadn't finished my curriculum by then. So if they had those Jeopardy questions about the things that happened at the end of that school year, my students didn't even have an opportunity to be introduced to that. And when I say that the implementation would take 3 to 5 years, you can't pull the rug out from under the teachers. You can't expect them to change all their lessons that first year until they get a better understanding and have that opportunity to either go to a workshop, hear Monica tomorrow, read more on those science standards. And I want to say it has to be a slow progression because you want to see that change happen slowly so the teachers themselves implement it. It is a change in practice. Somebody had told me, it's not the sage on the stage anymore. And sometimes that's hard to change. I mean, anything that you do. And to do it slowly and reinforce it and have your colleagues supporting you will make that easier. So that's why the idea is that 3 to 5 years.
If I might also, to Ms. Bentweiler's question, when the state did a sharp cutoff with the Common Core, towards the end it looked like there were some senior members at the State Department of Education that admitted that it might have been useful to have been able to have like a 2-year overlap, more for continuity of testing. The problem that the state ran into was the budgeting process. They had basically sharply curtailed the contract, as had the other New England states that formed the NECAP consortium. They had not placed into, kind of like as a backup, they had not had either negotiated for a continuation of the NECAP math and ELA for 2 more years, nor did they have the budget for it. So basically, they got painted into a corner of having a sharp cutoff with no transition. I do also know that the state is looking at that. So that's why I said, hold on to your horses. Most of the dates that you saw for State Board of Education decisions were before the election and before the inauguration of the new governor and before the appointment of the new Commissioner of Education. So just hold on. We'll have to wait and see.
And I think partly, we were actually told at some meetings that, they were hoping that it would be a 2-hour computer-based exam, that it would be process-based, that first year would be a pilot. And then the next meeting that I went to, the term that was used was that it's being evaluated.
Don't hold your breath.
So that piece of it. Personally, from a teaching point of view, I much rather give my students 2 hours to show me what skills and what they're able to do than have, which ends up being a 6-hour paper and pencil test of filling in bubbles. Because that's what the kneecap is. It's painful.
6 hours?
We, depending on which middle school that they were taking it from, they had 1 day of short answer and multiple choice type questions, and I think they were given 90 minutes to do that in, and then there was another day where they had the same thing, but it would cover different science domains. So you could see some questions were definitely physical science, some were life science, and some were earth science. And they made sure that they had a balance of that. So there was a second sitting where they did that again. And then there was a third sitting where either they were given a scenario where they collected data and wrote about that and made graphs, or they actually had a hands-on experiment and they had to write about it. It's very long.
What grade did they take these science kneecap?
They took them in 4th grade, 8th grade, and 11th grade. The 11th graders, many of them, because they only need 2 sciences, hadn't even taken science for
Just
quite
like
a while.
the other kneecap, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know how much change there is with this, Dr. Murataki. The idea was that they would do it more at the grade spans, that a new assessment would happen at 5th grade, which would make sense because it's the end of elementary school. They would still keep the 8th grade. They would also do 11th grade, but then they want to be flexible, knowing that 11th graders have AP exams, they have SATs, they have so many tests that they have to take, that they would be flexible on whether they did it at the beginning of the year or the end of the year, I believe.
My recollection is that the early discussions of framework almost mimicked the testing of the Common Core, 3 through 8 and 11. But I think in recent years, there's been an admission that 3 through 8 and 11 was probably testing too much. And they were talking about actually spacing it more.
Even more
Right.
than that. And I could definitely see that. With it being computer-based, it would be a simulation situation where they could actually modify what was going on, so they would get different outputs on whatever procedure that they were doing. And the important thing would be is that they would collect data and take that data, probably be able to graph it, and then support their claims with some piece of evidence.
Are there any other questions? Yes, Mr. Kaufman.
Thanks. I'm a little, maybe a little, I'll start off by just saying I'm a little confused.
Okay.
Because I think what your initial slide spoke to is that this wasn't a mandate from the state of New Hampshire,
They've
Right.
adopted it.
but it's not a mandate.
I don't believe
That
my
language
understanding,
wasn't-
right, and you might know this better than I do, actually, that there is legislation addressing Common Core and what would be next-gen science standards, that the state wouldn't tell a district that they specifically have to follow them, but then there was a small caveat in there that whatever standards you do follow have to meet or exceed those.
Yes, that's
And-
correct.
And I'm not going to go write science standards.
Right, and so I was going to say, but once you change the test, you've
Right.
effectively mandated that the curriculum has to match it, or
Right.
at least respond to it.
Right, and if you go back to that map, there are only 2 districts that aren't currently in some form following next-gen science standards, and then there's one that kind of has a blend.
Should there be a vote? You asked for support from the board. Are you asking the board to support the adoption of these standards and kind of green light the activities you spoke to?
Do you feel that that is something that's, when I said support, certainly I think that you may be seeing my face a lot more than you probably want to.
Well, I recall something Ms. Van Twyver said probably, I don't know, a year or so ago, that the Common Core, the adoption, the implementation of Common Core was never voted on
Okay.
by the board. That it just kind of got its own life and happened, and that impacted the district in so many different ways, multiple initiatives, all within the same time
Yep.
period with the competencies and rewriting the curriculum and all this stuff. So personally, I think you should get that personally. I think it would be good for everybody if we fully understood it, its implications, its timeline, who's going to develop the curriculum. It has to be redeveloped, right? You have to redo your lessons, essentially, is what you said,
I
into this
think
new
that
model.
any curriculum writing would be in the
I think Mr.
future.
Boucher has some insight into that.
Well, that's okay, but I just want to get out what I'm thinking, if you can hold on to that. Because it speaks here on page 5 of the document about it's the page of the principles. It talks about that there's going to be peer-reviewed lessons, submit them by whatever date. So I'm thinking, instead of us doing all this heavy lifting, well, that's where I wrote my note.
So you talk about peer review?
Yeah, somewhere in this document I read that there's peer review, submit your things by March, and the best things are going to be put up on the website so people can see them.
Actually, what happens as NextGen is a wonderful site and it's a great resource for teachers. What they have done is they want to be able to have lessons available to teachers that they might be able to use in their classroom. They don't want to put these lessons up on their site unless they have been vetted through that EQUIP rubric. So they actually have a consortium of educators that could apply to review these lessons to make sure that they are next-gen science standard worthy. So, yes, and that would have been in the newsletter that you actually read that
Okay.
in.
So,
So that was a process where districts that use NextGen and are very comfortable with NextGen and have strong NextGen lessons, that they submit those to, it's either NextGen or to Achieve, to be vetted through that EQUIP rubric so that they can be put out there as free resources
Right.
for other
so,
teachers. Yep.
so my thought is, because you mentioned that our teachers would have to take their current lessons and modify them to fit into this new teaching model. I imagine they'd also have to be changed into a competency-based model, right? There would be two things that, right, you have the frameworks that are changing, and then the whole piece of competencies that would have to be added. Is that right?
As a grading practice,
Well-
or,
Or the way you teach something, right, is all about the outcome. So I would think.
personally, I mean, when I teach, you know, I had that A, B, C, D piece of it, but if a student could demonstrate to me their knowledge and skill, it didn't matter to me how they demonstrated that, then as far as I was concerned, they met that standard.
But how
And
could
my
we not do
lessons
the
were-
competency-based grading as part of this? Wouldn't competency-based grading fit?
Yeah,
You'd be
Mr.
forced
Kaufman,
into-
I'll have to cut you off at this point.
Yeah, 'cause this is
Mr. Boucher has got
Back
something.
back to the original question, we're not requesting any action at this time.
It's also not a mandate.
Right, but if they
It's not-
change the test,
I
it's
understand.
effectively a
I understand the
mandate,
question.
right?
And this is probably good for further discussion, and I understand
Okay.
exactly where you're coming from.
Okay, thank you.
However, as I stated earlier, there's a lot changing. So, you know, I think it would be premature at this time for us to go ahead and get embroiled in a discussion in which the answers may be changing even as we speak.
So when is it gonna settle down? When are we gonna ask
In
for?
probably a few months.
And
I would guess by July, we will know.
how about when we'll start talking about an implementation plan, so it doesn't?
Probably not until next year.
Okay.
Seriously, just
Well,
hold on
I'm
to your
just trying to
horses.
get a feel for that,
Okay.
because I certainly don't want to be up against another competency-based grading problem or Common Core problem.
I think that with the current administration in place, we do not have to really be sweating this until at least next year. So just calm down about all of this. Yes, Ms. Holmes?
I'm not excited. Don't tell me to calm down.
Keeping that in mind, that being mindful of what you're saying, what I'd like to know is the district going to go ahead with pilots, or are we just going to wait till July before we start even considering pilots in the middle school and things like that?
Okay, I think I'd like to respond to Ms. Hornsey's question. I have one little question of my own, and then I think we need to let you go.
okay.
So just give me a
Yeah.
brief period. Because this is not a mandate and it is not being required from the state, one of the advantages or the disadvantages, if you will, is that many of the textbooks and the resources that we already have in district that we've been purchasing for the last several years are already aligned to the next generation science standards. It was difficult to purchase anything that didn't have that quality. So, as it makes sense, and thinking of it more as a best practice as opposed to a mandate, if it makes sense, I think, for the classroom teachers, as we develop our Nashua science standard, we can choose from the current framework, we can pick and choose from the next generation science standards, if that's what this district believes is correct. But I do not think that we need to rush pell-mell into aligning the Nashua framework for science with the NGSS like we did with Common Core. So the assessment question is another question we'll have to look at. It turned out that when we did our alignments for Common Core, we were so rushed because of everything else going on that we did in fact align our framework and our competencies like a laser beam with the Common Core requirements. And I think every educator in the district will admit to that. So we do not foresee that happening for science. One little question that I've got. Assuming that we go ahead and do accept elements of NGSS, you did mention the professional development, PD. I know that when we began to adopt Common Core, especially our elementary teachers, many of our elementary teachers were not math whizzes. And many of our elementary teachers admit to not being science whizzes either. So given that NGSS raises the bar in science, I think we have to remain very sensitive to the fact that there will exist, just as there was for math, what the State Department of Education used to call euphemistically a knowledge gap. And we really have to be sensitive as we adopt new standards to make sure that our teachers don't get left behind.
Yeah.
Because that happened with math, unfortunately.
And to comment on what you said, first off, the comment of best practice, and I really think that is the way that we need to look at this. As science teachers from the secondary level, it's not so much the content of these, but it is that best practice, exactly what you had said, and it is a change in teaching practice. So I think that's a thought that really needs to be held. Now, I'm very happy of what you said about the elementary school teachers, because just before this started, I was having a conversation with Krista Burrell, our math coach, and I was saying to her that I was actually excited because I want to be able to maybe extend the scope that I have and be a resource for those elementary school teachers. And the way they're teaching right now, if I had the opportunity to go in and see what they were doing, I would not be surprised that they are doing this. The wonderful thing about elementary school teachers, they teach children. Somewhere along the line, when we get up into secondary education, we start teaching content. There's a big difference. Next Gen is teaching children.
Right.
And that is a big change in practice. So I certainly want to make myself a resource for those elementary school teachers. I don't want them to feel like they don't have someone that they can email, that they can call, that they would like someone to come in and, watch them do a lesson or have me model a lesson for them, whatever it is that they need. And in a way, I was a little excited that maybe next year I might have that opportunity to do that. So
One final thing before you leave, as you're packing up
Sure.
your books and things.
They're all in the other room.
I'd like to recognize that Mr. Hallowell, who is in this room, has served on the governor's STEM task force. So, Mr. Hallowell, do you have any comments just to close this up? Because I know you've spent a fair amount of your time and effort on that task force.
Yeah, I'll be quick. So Ms. Janicek knows, because she was one of the first teachers that I reached out to about that when I got on the committee. Just in terms of the standards, so I think, to me, the most important thing is the map that shows teachers already using these ideas, right? So they're not necessarily, it's not like they've imported the standards, it's the process that they're using in order to do it. My recommendation on the STEM task force was for the BOE, for the State Board of Education to not adopt them, because I think this then leads to a whole thing of, is it mandated, is it not? They chose to do something different. Turns out people don't always listen to me. And because I think the important thing is it really was the science standards was really a ground up. It was the teachers like Ms. Janicek and others saw the opportunity to use hands-on learning, right? So to me, that's the important thing, is the hands-on learning, because that's how you learn science, right? It's not, you don't read it out of a book and become a scientist. You really have to get into it. So
Thank you very much. Okay, and thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, and I hope that I get to come back.
Thank you.
You're always welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I added you to the list, just so you know. Number
All right.
23 is develop Nashua science standards.
Oh,
So
there we
be part
go.
of our discussion.
So I guess our next item is machining and manufacturing Algebra 1 pilot.
You'll come down a couple seats, Mary Ann, come join the group.
Probably a little easier.
Thank you for your patience.
It's okay.
For the record, I'm leaving.
So hopefully you all received a handout in your packet. I worked with Mr. Frederickson on last week to make sure that you had talking points that we'll be going over. Thank you for your vote of confidence, Dr. Murataki, on this being an exciting topic.
It is for me anyway.
I will say that this is something that's really been percolating, I think, over the last at least 4 to 5 years. One of the things that's happened is in the past, we used to have a math class called technical math. But it was actually brought about later in the high school experience as opposed to trying to look at embedding it in an earlier experience. So a little bit of the background, we were fortunate enough with Perkins dollars to send 2 representatives from the Nashua Technology Center to the national conference in Las Vegas, which is called, it's ACTE. It stands for the Association of Career and Technical Education. And in sending those individuals, certainly we always hope we're going to get something back, and I think we definitely got quite a bit back. One of the areas that they were able to attend is basically learning different math courses through the application in a CTE program. So one of the topics was construction and geometry, so learning geometry through construction. And then the other is this is a little bit newer model of teaching algebra through a manufacturing applied science, if you will. So we looked at some of the materials that they brought back, and obviously, again, a lot of enthusiasm, and felt that, we really need to take a look at, is this something that we might look at for within our district? And one of the things, obviously, is we have a fairly high failure rate in Algebra 1, which was very similar to the speakers, the presenters at the workshop. They had a fairly similar demographic to Nashua, as well as we are pretty close on that failure rate. And as we all know, it is a graduation requirement. So we're trying to assist students to be successful in algebra, but also start to explore some of the wide variety of applications of algebra and combine that with looking at within some of the national statistics as well as our state statistics, the good living wages possible at the variety of different levels in the field of manufacturing. So, as you know, we haven't been able to run our machining program now, and we were looking at hopefully coming to this committee as well as, making some changes in the way we were even delivering the machining program. So that's also on the handout, because obviously in considering this, if we have this come on board for the 9th and 10th grade, what's next after that? So everything was kind of coming together at the same time. So called Mr. Frederickson over, and I'd already had a conversation with Keith Richards, our principal, and then the head teachers, and then some of our existing CTE teachers. And I will reference in particular one of the areas where we've found a great crossover working with math. And I also had Kelly Gabriel, who's the head math teacher, involved in this discussion. We've had the good fortune of having a math teacher who was also a trained engineer come in and start to teach our engineering program. So I'm happy to report that program has turned around. We have a good amount of students requesting those particular areas, as well as she was continuing to teach in the math department. This is obviously a great internal partnership for CTE and math. And so we talk about this and say, what do you think? And everybody seemed to be fairly positive that maybe the time is right. And this might actually be a really a helpful way to bring back the machining program, which we would hope to move and grow into machining and manufacturing 1 and 2. So, trying to figure out how we could do this, given the current budget situation. You know, we already know we have instructors that are teaching algebra, so we don't need a new algebra teacher. We just need to borrow and train an existing algebra teacher. And then the tricky part becomes we don't have a CTE full running program in machining, so how could we do this? So I reached out to the New Hampshire Works Department and the Department of Resource and Economic Development to work with their sector partnership focus areas, which specifically has a manufacturing sector. I had them come out, we went through the lab, we provided them with a list of each piece of equipment and who was the manufacturer of that piece of equipment. And they've felt and they've communicated that they want to do a launch this spring and bring in additional industry partners.
They being Dread.
Dread.
Here.
Here. And basically, I've already reached out to all of my existing machining advisory members, as well as I also coincidentally met with BAE about bringing back the manufacturing internship opportunity. So everything's kind of coming into place at the same time. Obviously we needed to know that we would have that algebra math teacher. That would be the teacher of record for Nashua, the secondary recognized, highly qualified instructor who would be responsible for making sure the grading, as well as attendance and all, some of the other responsibilities of our teacher of record. It's really hard because we don't have enough. If we don't have enough numbers to run a machining section, what kind of hook am I going to give to students to get into that machining and manufacturing program? So reached out to these industries, site partners that I've been working with over the last 15 plus years. And they have heard this as well and kind of some thoughts about what we would like to do. And needless to say, they are pretty excited. They want to see the machining manufacturing program get off the ground. They feel this might be it's going to be a win-win for kids to have an opportunity to work in a manufacturing environment as well as meet that requirement for the Algebra 1 graduation requirement.
And is this also working into the pre-apprenticeship programs that we've heard about recently?
Yep.
This is one of those 16 career tracks that
Right.
lines up with the
Right.
U.S. Department of Labor.
And that would be the
Excellent.
career pathway. So on the document that I put in the packets, you can see that the high school pathway, and this is not limited to just this. I want to stress that we could have a student still coming into machining and manufacturing from the Introduction to Engineering Design. Maybe they were going to take the VEX Robotics class, which is offered right next to the machining and manufacturing facility. We could have a student coming from the middle school at basically their freshman year. They're taking their algebra and their geometry, and then they decide they want to go right into the machining and manufacturing. So there's still going to be, 5+ ways to get into introduction to machining and manufacturing.
Oh, okay, so I've got at least one question from Mr. Kaufman.
I'm just curious, I'm very enthusiastic, I want those machines to be used, I want them to hum all day long
All day
if
long.
possible. But I was curious, when we speak about our CTE program as being a regional resource, does this particular course offering and getting the manufacturing piece back up and running, is that a draw from other schools for students who may, in other words, can this course be marketed essentially in our geography to help pull in additional enrollments if we're a little shy on our own?
And I would say yes, looking down the road. But for this, obviously this is a pilot, I'm trying to keep it budget neutral, and I'm trying to find out if I have an instructor who's a math instructor who's interested, and I have a variety of business partners that are interested in different ways. So not all of them are going to send me an instructor tomorrow. I'm trying to work on that. That's part of the discussion with DRED. So to your question, could I open it up regionally based on some new legislation that recently went through? The SOP, we can actually have tuition and transportation potentially reimbursed for our area students to come in. And as you can see, this particular pilot would be available in freshman or sophomore years. So based on that legislation, I would say yes, if we grew the program, and to your point of having the machines humming, 4 blocks a day, we could be running something that's pretty meaningful and meets a couple of different deliverables. From my perspective, I look at it and say, okay, algebra, get these kids in there, give them an opportunity to have a successful experience. They could go through this pilot, and they've been successful, and perhaps they learned that manufacturing still might not be for them, but they would like to do that automotive program. Well, a prerequisite for auto is Algebra 1. So I see
You
that
can't hide
as...
from algebra.
No, I see that as, that's a positive. They learn maybe they're not going to do manufacturing, but they can access that program because they've demonstrated that they're successful in the baseline learning and knowledge to be successful in the automotive program. So I don't see, and I feel that's an important learning for any student who's involved in a CTE program. This gives them a chance to try something at an earlier stage, and I would hope that the instructors involved would career advise them to go shadow that CTE program at the different school if they're a South student, just so that they can see that might be an application for them. So
I'll follow up on Mr. Kaufman's question and then open it up to other members. So, in your explanation back to Mr. Kaufman, I guess my question from your response is, are we expecting one new course to be proposed to our program of studies or 2?
it's actually, we wouldn't be going at this point to put it in the program of studies because we're actually trying, it was our hope that we could try this in the coming fall. That said, students have already selected their courses. Hence the reason I went and met with the middle school guidance staff as well as the tech ed.
Okay, let me ask this. So this is actually for Mr. Boucher. So if it's not currently in the program of studies, how do we do that? How do we offer it to students this fall without it being in the course catalog?
I think you take advantage of that magical word, pilot.
Pilot.
And the students would be selected and recommended based on my meeting with the middle school partners.
I like that. I don't think I've ever seen a pilot that hadn't been, fully.
Well, you notice in year 1, it's cost neutral. So one of the things, the advantages you gain from a pilot is you learn things. For example, what potential costs might be.
Interesting.
So before you'd want to invest in this from a budgetary perspective,
Okay,
seeing a pilot, seeing it in action would be very beneficial.
I'm thrilled. Any other board members? Yes, Ms. Hansi, go ahead.
So you're going to pull kids that are interested in taking manufacturing and that have a need to do the Algebra 1 and trying to put them together this fall?
It would be a student that would have that dual opportunity in the fall. It would be a student, so in my conversations with the middle school tech ed teachers, because they've designed, updated, and implemented the new robotics component, they've done 3D printing, they've recently got CNC machining within their labs. They can identify those students that they feel would really thrive in this opportunity.
But those middle school students have already filled out their course requests, so you're going to be talking to them one-on-one to see if you can pull or find a pilot within,
Right,
okay.
right. So
And then-
sorry, based on my meeting with them, we think we're going to have about 30 students, and we're going to have to pick
And limit it. yeah.
and limit it because it is a pilot.
Okay. And when you have this manufacturing, machining and manufacturing, Tech 1 and 2, those are to be developed, they're not coming out this fall?
They're not coming out this fall. They retained their name and their description in the program of studies because we did not have an avenue to come through and put those changes forward for this last publication.
Can
So-
we do a pilot for that too, or is that?
Well,
being
if we have enough students and if they did introduction to machining, if we have enough students to select that class, we can run year one. Last year's budget, though, we did not have a machining instructor. And so I'm trying to be creative about how I'm going to get that
How many
instructor.
machining students do we have now? Does anyone know? How many applied for that?
We know how many students did an initial request that I can pull out of X2.
So we have a good number of them to get those machines going again?
We have enough, but we might not meet the threshold that the board sets out
Oh.
when making decisions on what courses we'll run and what courses we won't. So in a lab, like the machining lab, you don't want more than 18 students in there.
Okay.
But when you're faced with what we're all faced with in making those difficult budget decisions, and you have an English class of 31, and you have a machining class, maybe 10 students, and you've set the threshold at 12, then it becomes the conversation, can we still run that with the 10 students?
Do we know what the number is yet?
I
'Cause
wouldn't.
We're anxious, we just want those machines
I know.
coming.
I know. And I've reached out to NCC as one of the collaborative partners. They sit on the advisory committee. Can the students in the machining program at the college come over? Let's run them.
Yeah.
I've reached out to the Haas representative because they can come out, and I would have to probably pay them through Perkins or through my maintenance line item and local budget to come out and run the machines. So I feel like I'm trying to get all that in place, and I understand, believe me, the concern about the equipment sitting there.
Yeah.
And
Looks
I
like-
personally cannot operate those machines
Right.
myself, so I'm trying to get the experts out to do that. They would be running quite a few of them in this pilot. We would have that
Oh, the
opportunity
The
because-
algebra and manufacturing
because
would
the
use them?
Right, the class
Good.
would actually be housed in the computer lab classroom adjacent to the machining lab.
I've got Mr. Kaufman up for a question, but do other members have a question before Mr. Kaufman? Okay, Mr. Kaufman?
So my support is unwavering, but I am going to say something it's not intended to contradict. I think, as I understand, this program it's stumbled for the last year or so.
Are we talking the machining program?
Yeah.
Yes.
And this is a reboot.
Trying,
And I think it's clever, and I love the fact that you're integrating two things together, and the hands-on kids can actually learn math at the same time, and I think is the coolest thing. But I do want to say, I think through this process, through this reboot process, and all the outreach you're doing, I think as much as the goal is to continue this program and grow it and have a full room of students and potentially additional staff because the demand is strong, I think we realistically have to have another evaluative process that says if we, after a year or two or whatever that is, we should be able to say what it is. And I look to you. We tried this for 3 years. We did it whatever, and the enrollments have fallen again. We haven't been able to generate the interest either from the middle school or as a regional center to pull in kids or whatever. I think we have to include I think we've we're gonna have to give this up because we've tried, we rebooted, we put our best effort in, and I don't want us to fail, okay? I hope
I
you
understand
understand that.
that.
But I think realistically, we have to sadly keep that in the back of our head, because that's a huge lab.
Right.
And if it's not gonna be productive for our kids, we probably have to alternatively look at what we could put in there in whatever period of time,
Right.
so that it can be a productive space. So I want to say that, and I think that's a good thing, okay? If it works, we're running
Yep.
full speed ahead. But if we struggle again, I think we have to have the courage to admit, okay, we couldn't do that here. But, and not that I love welding, I'm gonna learn how to weld. And the average age is 50 or more in the United States for welders. So if you have other rooms somewhere, you would throw in a welding program. But I'm just saying, we have to be realistic. We have to cut it if it needs to be
Right.
cut. And I realize that could easily be a 2 or 3 year process to
Oh, yeah.
reach that decision. But I just would like that part of,
Right.
you know, your evaluation criteria to continue or not.
I'm confident this is very similar to like starting a new business. I am from industry, so I recognize, I know what this will take to make it work. Completely restructuring it, bringing it down to students who are younger, I think is key. I've studied 2 to 3 other successful models in the state. North Conway had a problem within their numbers, and we all know that part of the solution is getting the right instructor. The particular instructor that they have has a side business where he manufactures and machines parts for race cars. It's very attractive to the students. In addition, he's actually been consulting with me and willing to give me his entire curriculum and lessons. I just did buy the new textbook that mirrors what he's using. What he does, and this is what was kind of interesting in the pathways, so under special projects as 12th graders, basically his students they have designed and now they continue to manufacture the casing of a pen that is gravity resistant and basically they manufacture this and then it goes to NASA and then it goes up on the ships. And 2 to 3 of the students in their senior year get to go down to NASA on NASA's funding, and it's quite impressive because the students see, now they're making a part that is real. This is a part of my conversation with BAE, was if there was a widget of some sort that we could be collaborating and manufacturing, the kids could see that this is going, as part of BAE, their whole mission statement is, we protect those who protect us. I think that's a hook for kids. We do so many things that are not meaningful. To have something like that they can say on their resume, senior project. I think that's powerful. The other piece that I think is an option for these seniors, they can actually go out and work at Micromatics. They can work over at C&M Machining. They may have their own invention that they are looking to bring to market. Perhaps that's what their special project ELO would be their senior year. So there's so many different options that I think once you have that visibility that this is what you can do and how cool it is, I think that's when your enrollments will start to climb again. And, bringing BAE back in with the manufacturing internship, students who maybe can't think about attending college because it's cost prohibitive. A company oftentimes has tuition reimbursement for people that are looking to gather that education while they're working. So, again, I hear what you're saying, and believe me, I've done this long enough. I know it's really heartbreaking to close a program, but I know, it sometimes has to be done, and it's hard, but The equipment that we have in there is all purchased with federal or state dollars. Local funds did not support that. Those would have to be offered up to another center with the state to reallocate it. It would be a lot of work, and given the manufacturing base in this particular area, I think industry would not want to see that happen. And I think they're working hard, whether it's at the governor's council level, an advisory capacity, working with DRED to get behind this. So I think everything, I like to think that things are aligning.
The planets have aligned.
I think we're in a good place, but it is like it's like opening a new program at this point. And at the end of 3 years, again, starting a new business, we don't see results, then we have to start looking at that, making those difficult decisions.
Ms. Lindsay?
Thank you. I like your idea of you were mentioning race car parts. Can we work with automotive? Because I know decades ago when I was young, they used to customize carburetors sometimes to make more sound or different sounds. There must be some customized parts that they could work back and forth and see the real results. And also, can we advertise more? Like, I understand that other CTE centers have signs out front of their high schools. Maybe if every time a parent picked up their kid, they saw Nashua High North or South, and they also saw like regional CTE center, they would start saying, well, what is it? And they would look closer. It sort of rings a bell. Maybe we need to get out there and be a little bit more forward in our advertising of these remarkable programs that we've got. Because not everybody knows.
Right.
So I think, something visible or tangible might help them. Because we're going to run that project, we're not going to shut that down.
I'm all for new signage, but again, I don't even know who makes that decision to say, yes, you can do this at the high schools, but.
Could woodworking be the project?
Oh, I'm not worried about getting it done. I'm saying we have to get approval, and I think that would have to.
Not from the city.
At the state board, local board of education would make a.
Make
Is that
that
finance committee? Or-
Well, we can scope out what it would cost, what it would look like. I already have the vision of one in my mind.
Okay, we'll bring it up.
Bring it up.
I've got several questions. Are the other board members done with their questions? Okay. All right, so here's why I'm excited. For some time now, the state requirements for graduation have changed. There is no longer a formal requirement for a course called Algebra 1 to graduate. However, somewhere amongst your courseware, there needs to be accumulated the competencies which is equivalent to algebra. So the first question that I've got is that if you take a look at the numerous Algebra 1 courses that we offer here at this high school, all of them must meet the minimum number of competencies required to be deserving of it being called Algebra 1. There are what, 4? Are there 4? 5? There's some number of competencies which you must satisfy in order for it to be called Algebra 1. So I'm assuming that however many of those minimum competencies there are, that this prototype or whatever you want to call it, course, the student graduating from this course would check off the minimum number of competencies required for Algebra 1. Is that a correct assumption?
Yes.
Okay. And in addition, there would be additional competencies for things like machining.
Correct.
Okay. So this isn't just your normal foundations algebra
No.
course. Okay. That's a good thing. All right, so the second reason why I'm really excited about this, in addition to, the reasons that Mr. Kaufman have already stated, I think so nicely, is that this is like a technical high school algebra course. As a matter of fact, that's exactly what this thing looks like. There are other schools that I know that if they do have an algebra requirement, these are not in this state, I'm just familiar with them from my past, is that they may have like 2 trades courses let's say trades 1 and trades 2. They would often actually split the algebra requirement amongst 2 sequential courses. And they would say trades 1/algebra 1A, trades 2/algebra 1B, and kind of like spread the algebra requirements over 2 or more courses. I believe that was what the intention was in the change to ED 306, was to allow schools the flexibility of distributing the algebra requirement over 2 or more courses that aren't called algebra. Because it's been noticed that there are some students for whom doing all of the competencies for algebra in one semester is a little tough. So anyway, the establishment of this course, I think, is the first interesting baby step that our school district is taking towards achieving that. You know, by identifying these are the algebra competencies, and we can mix them with trades. So that's one of the reasons why I was so enthusiastic about your presenting this information. Okay, so that's the first part.
It is a full year pilot, just so you know.
It's a full year pilot.
Because of just what you're talking about.
Oh, okay, so the algebra competencies would be offered over a full year. So normally Algebra 1 would be taken in one semester,
Or there is an Algebra 1 full year.
or there's an Algebra 1 full year. But, so does the full year Algebra 1 only satisfy the minimum competencies required to be Algebra 1, or does it go Algebra 1, Algebra 2?
Algebra 1 full year, it's just
Full year.
it's
Just
just a
spread
different
it.
pace for students who need
Got
that
it.
year.
Okay, thank you very much. So, given that this is a prototype or a pilot course, normally if this were going to be submitted for inclusion in our program of studies, we would essentially vote to approve.
Right.
So, are we seeking a vote from this committee to approve this pilot?
Well, everybody's waiting for that to happen.
People are ready to move.
People are ready to
The board
move,
supports
but
the
we-
initiative.
Okay,
Mr. Frederickson felt that this was
then
the next step.
all right, so do I have such a motion from a member to approve this pilot as presented?
I'll move if Howard's not here and do it.
Ms.
I'll
Van
second
Twyver?
that.
Okay.
Okay, that's fine. So, all in favor? So, the committee approves moving forward with this pilot.
Okay.
Is there anything else that we need to discuss?
Just wanted to let you know that, again, it's budget neutral from a local funds perspective.
Okay.
Perkins funding, we would have to make a change and ask the state, but I don't anticipate a problem for the training, because then we'd have to send at least 2 teachers to training. Perkins can cover that.
Okay.
I have industry looking at the technical instructor, if you will, to collaborate and work with our math instructor to deliver this. And in the event that we like the pilot, and we would like to run it 4 times during the day and actually pay a math instructor, you can use Perkins funding for that sort of initiative, innovative expansion.
Okay.
But I just want to clarify the thing that basically is, after 3 years, if that instructor's been paid by Perkins, the district then needs to
Mhm.
pick up that position.
Okay.
So,
So, Mr. Kaufman, in your absence, the committee moved to approve
Oh,
the
terrific.
pilot.
She has to go to the full board, correct?
It does have to go to the full board.
Thank you.
But
That's a shoo-in.
that whole renewal or the flip over from Perkins to fully funded, that would be the decision point based upon your enrollments, and so we'll know, we'll have good data.
Yeah, especially given that this is a budget neutral
Right, for now.
situation, I think that it'll not have any problems passing the full board.
And let us know what we can do to help.
Yes, that was the
well, I
final
want you
question
to
for
attend the launch, the dread launch, so that we can all brainstorm and think about what we can do in addition to putting signs out and
Date and a time.
just getting getting those students to start looking again. You know, I believe that Dred is very excited to have a company partner be working and manufacturing something at Nashua High School South in the NTC South campus.
So, Mr. Boucher, I think this would be of sufficient interest to the board, that perhaps during the next board meeting, there should be a short presentation, or at some future board meeting, there should be a presentation on
You
this
talking about
one.
next Monday, or?
It would be, I think, if we held it in combination with the next board meeting at which we would make motions to approve.
So the first one in April?
I think so. I think this
Would you have more, a better idea of where it's headed by then?
Yes. I would have probably 30 students that I would be trying to interview.
Recruit.
Right.
You're recruiting.
I'm not recruiting, I have the tech ed instructors.
Teachers are recruiting.
So I guess my...
What if you held an event?
Well, the launch would be kind of part of that event. And I think part of it is praising these students who've taken the opportunity to do this and make them feel special, because not only is it special, but they'll be pioneers.
Yes, Mr. Kaufman, yeah.
I can tell you, I taught the work ready, career readiness up at Laconia Community
Okay.
College. But in our adjacent classroom was all the machining equipment. And these were adults. They all had jobs before they walked out of there.
Right, I know.
The demand for the skill set that goes with this kind of educational opportunity, these guys were being picked up before they ever completed the program, and some of them were working as they attended. The demand is very strong. So if anybody's thinking about that at home, students have aptitude and like to get their hands into equipment and want to get their algebra dealt with, it is a great way to do it. So, but the demand in the workforce is absolutely there.
Thank you very much. I think this probably completes this part of the presentation. I saw another item on here, update on farm to
No,
school.
they haven't told me.
No, that's a report from last,
April?
Oh, I see.
that was a summary of the last meeting.
All right, thank
Or
you.
early on that day.
Okay.
Okay, so, right, so the bar chart.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marianne.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's a very interesting presentation.
This is, I'm not presenting this, I'm providing this as information. I was told that a member of the committee or of the board, I'm not sure which, had requested this information in the past, so I'm just forwarding it
Oh, okay.
without comment.
South end there. All right. And will this be also included as an attachment to the regular board packet?
Well, they got
They
it
already
in the-
got it.
in this week's packet.
Oh, it did. All right, that's right.
And we've got update on the grading as one of our items.
Okay.
Will there
Right.
be a discussion of it forthcoming?
You have a question?
I don't remember who requested the
I
information.
requested the
You did?
information.
Oh,
I
okay.
asked Mr. Frederickson, and then I showed him what we did last year, and he came up with this, which is great.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any questions at this point?
I think at some point, which is why we've got it on our future agenda items, we have to review the pilot program and see where we stand and make a longer-term decision.
Mhm.
So whether we do it later or now.
Pilot
or-
program in,
The competency-based grading in the high school is a pilot, and it was put in through the end of the year, but sometime before the end of the year, we need to evaluate it to make a decision. You can't wait till July and say, well, we're changing it, you gotta do it ahead of time. So if there was a change or an adjustment, that we would have the time to make those changes or adjustments. So that's why I wanted the information ahead of time, so we could start analyzing the data and see if we have any decisions to make.
I mean, I did have one question. I was trying to figure out where the Cs went. And when we looked at it perhaps to the NC is no credit,
Correct.
correct? And by and large, that might have been, or maybe some of it filtered into the Fs.
There's not a big difference between 2013 and 2016 in the C range.
But there is some missing data. I didn't add the previous years, but if you add up north, it only comes to 96.6. So there's 3.4% missing. So maybe
You're
some,
looking at, which year are you looking at?
taking south, the top one, I took the blue, the dark blue, and added up those percentages. It should have added to 100. It was almost 3.5 short. And the bottom one, for north, was 1.5 short. So there's some grading that didn't come through. Or maybe it's rounding.
That's a lot, that's a big gap for rounding, I think.
I don't know, but
For only 1, 2, 3, 5 data points rounding up
right.
that.
But if you add them up, they're missing. So maybe we can get a clarification. Maybe get the raw numbers so we can do our own.
I don't understand any of this, to be honest with you. What, is this supposed to be all of the students at South?
Percentage of kids that got an A over, there were A's given.
Oh, these are
over-
percentages?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
One semester, just one semester, the fall
Yeah,
semester.
that's what I saw there, but I didn't know that these were percentages.
Yes.
That would have been nice to be added there.
Well, previously, we had charts, I think, I brought one from last year, and they had percentages on the side, so I'm just assuming that it's
Well,
similar.
I don't have that from last year, so how was I supposed to know?
That's true, that's how I clued in.
Okay, so is there any business other than what we've already discussed? Do I have a motion? Yes, Mr.
I
Cobb?
thought one of the things we were going to do was prioritize or look to the list. I guess, was it the last meeting, we kind of brainstormed on all these topics. And then I thought one of the things we were going to do tonight was to begin the process of prioritizing or setting up agendas or, you know, put a focus to these things rather than, I didn't think this was intended as a sequential list. I thought it was a brainstorming list.
It's random.
Right, and then we were going to decide what we wanted next, that kind of thing.
Well, while we could do that, we have basically gone through the two main agenda items on our agenda, and there is a subsequent meeting that we're bumping up against.
Right, we have about 15 minutes.
If we take our full time.
Right.
Can you just tell us what the next month is going to be?
So far, it's middle school English language arts.
Okay.
I think I'm forgetting one other thing, but obviously if I've lost it, it wasn't that concrete.
Well, if there's only one item, do you think that would take the whole night? So what else would you
Compare it to what
recommend?
you did with the, if you look at that, like the high school civics,
Okay,
that type of presentation.
okay.
Right, so that would have been item 3 on the future list. We took care of items 1 and 2 today.
Right.
It's always nice to cross item numbers off a long list.
Yes.
And then the 4th item would be update on competency-based grading. I mean, we don't have to take these in order, but
I would be interested in that one, or the kindergarten curriculum. Both of those are high-interest items.
I agree.
Especially if we're going to be adopting
We need to know what we're
curriculum.
adopting.
Yeah. So 3 and 5?
There was already a curriculum in place. I think the discussion was that you're going to ask staff to re-examine that curriculum.
Right, let me,
That's a big.
that is a big thing, and one of the things that I keep on stressing is that we in this district know, at least those of us that worked through those years, is that there was about a 3 to 4 year period of time, and we just surfaced out of that within the past year, where we were doing way too much at one time. We were trying to align ourselves with Common Core. We knew we were going to be tested using the Smarter Balance Assessment, which tested against the 85% common parts of Common Core. We were coming up with competencies, establishing rubrics and, for those competencies. We're doing it all at once. And as a consequence, and I'll say it again over and over, our staff admits that they only had enough time to align the Nashua competencies and curricula for math and English language arts for the 85% requirements for the Common Core. We did not delete anything. We did not add anything. They were exactly the Common Core requirements. In the years that have passed, I think that we've gotten a lot of experience under our belt on what parts of that works and what parts of it don't work. And interestingly enough, we now have the latitude at the local level for us to do a thorough bottom-up review of our curriculum and decide what do we want to keep, what do we want to change, and discuss it at the local level. Because we are going to be adopting full-day kindergarten, and there are clearly issues with the full-day K curriculum, I think that we also, in addition to doing a bottoms-up review, especially for K through 6, or K through 8 rather, we need to probably go ahead and put a special emphasis on kindergarten. So I think that that's a message that I still believe needs to go out to the teachers in the district and those that are dealing with curriculum. So, and Ms. Swansea, your comment?
I would be interested in hearing from some of the experienced kindergarten teachers, not the ones that are just starting off, that have had a couple different curriculums that they've used, and for them to come and say what works, what doesn't, and give us their input. Have a discussion to see if we need to change, what would they like, do they need more recess, is there too much class, desk time, do they want more play, can all children handle a full day, and what would they, different things that they would suggest from the bottom up, not us telling them necessarily, but having a conversation with them, because we're concerned expanding this program and not analyzing the benefits or the potential harms.
And if I might suggest, Mr. Boucher, a number of years back, before you got to this position, one of the things that we did in the Nashua district, which I thought was very useful, and turned out it was the first time this had ever happened apparently, was that we determined to try to figure out why were so many students failing algebra multiple times. And so the math teachers and the guidance at both high schools, within each high school, had discussions and then met as a pair of high schools and then presented to this committee. Part of the finger pointed down at the middle schools, so the 3 middle schools met independently and then together, and then briefed this committee, and then pointed the finger downwards at the elementary schools. I think Ms. Hohensy's point is a good one. What should probably occur is that the kindergarten teachers in each building teaching kindergarten, whether it's a half day or full day, should probably have an opportunity to get together, have a discussion, share ideas on what works and what doesn't work, their recommendations for change, and maybe have that done with, as a committee of or representatives from each school then converse at the district level, and then pick members to come and talk with the school.
You already have a plan in place to do that?
So when do you think that outbrief might occur?
The grant, I submitted a grant for 11,000 plus, which would have allowed all 40 teachers to come together. The state awarded us 6,000.
Okay.
So what I would do is supplement that 6,000 with additional hour money in the curriculum budget. I don't suspect that all 40 teachers are going to show up, but we don't necessarily need all 40.
So when does Ms. Holensie get to?
This would be, they're
Talk to the
going to get
teachers.
together after school ends. We're going to put the full-day people in a room with half-day people for 2 days.
That is late. I mean,
And it's very late.
Would-
It's still good.
I will caution you that you are now in the final trimester.
no, I understand.
It's full speed ahead, so
Okay.
um,
Will that provide an opportunity to put in the late-breaking changes so that when kindergarten kicks off in September, that the benefit of that shared information will then essentially allow a,
What's the purpose of it? Is it to convey how to transform the 7 half-day programs to full-day programs? Or is it which,
that's a big part of it, yeah.
right, because we've got 5 full days and 7 half-days.
Right.
So I don't know that the focus of that, maybe we need a separate group that analyzes before we get to that stage,
Mhm.
what's working and what's not, both in the half and the full day. So maybe we need that as a prelude to
The
using
only
the funds.
potential time I see could be during early releases, remaining early releases for this year, April and May. Try to get them together.
so what I'm curious about is, I am not a kindergarten teacher, but were I a kindergarten teacher, if there was something like a survey monkey that asked a question, I would probably be willing to, poke in my thoughts into a survey monkey
Yeah.
Yeah.
that might be viewable by other teachers within the district. You may want to provide some degree of anonymity, or maybe not. I think that would be a good prelude to the series of workshops that you're discussing.
Or alternatively to a survey, which is a good idea, but if that doesn't work, if we had a handful that came and met with us, whether it's at night or during the day, and we can exchange some ideas, they can go back, and then we come again and have a second discussion, somehow to get the conversation going, that they have a lot more flexibility, and to think in those terms, rather than just implement what we've got, to reflect upon and make the best decisions going forward.
Another alternative or possibility, which may be in combination with that, is to actually schedule specifically a meeting of this committee and essentially have part of it as a, not an extended public comment period in which kindergarten teachers can have the opportunity to share their information with this committee
Okay.
prior to
Or parents.
the workshop.
Or parents.
Parents would
too.
also be welcome. My guess, though, is that we would probably have, assuming that we advertise this correctly, that such a public comment period would occupy the entire 2-hour time slot for this committee.
Or
And you'd probably be at the boardroom, not here.
if we had feedback forms, some could come in person, some might just give us a paragraph.
I think we're maybe putting the cart before the horse. I think the examination of the curriculum should start with the teachers, and then they bring their suggestions to the board, publicize them to all the stakeholders. I think we start with the teachers.
That'd be great.
We should start with the teachers.
Okay, and let's start with their feedback.
Because I've been hearing all kinds of things informally.
Right.
I know there's plenty that we can change. All right,
So before we adjourn, I just would,
So
you guys brought us to the point of when. So, Mr. Boucher, can you come back to us with a timeline
When what?
as to when that teacher feedback might be first available, so we could then use it as part of a public comment day?
I'll have to talk to some folks.
Because I think with the apparent or likely adoption of kindergarten, and before your folks meet at the end of the school year, I'm getting that this is a discussion that should likely occur.
It could be very open-ended. what do you like? What do you think needs improvement? And any suggestions, just open the floor to them. And
I,
get all
um,
their feedback.
I think also that a homework assignment for members of this committee, and maybe we can try to do this within the next week or two, is to compile a list of questions that we would like to have the teachers address. And we should be specific to, required items of the curriculum, play, socialization, whatever it is that we think would be an issue.
Okay.
As an example, if if you put me up to this, what I'll basically do is to create a matrix of every, core requirement out of the kindergarten integrated curriculum for math and English language arts and say what works, what doesn't work, what doesn't work. That's a long list. And I can see one of the reasons why kindergarten teachers often despair when they take a look at that long list of requirements that they're
Especially if they're
required.
only teaching half a day.
Yes, absolutely. So, I can already, guarantee that there's going to be all kinds of feedback simply by inputting that list.
Okay, so we'll do that.
Have you looked at those requirements? There are hundreds of them.
Oh, my goodness. Well,
So do you think for our next scheduled committee meeting, kindergarten, would we be able to have the board's questions and some kind of survey monkey
I'm not
thing
gonna promise that.
done?
No, I don't think that.
No.
Because that's April.
he was saying do that on our own
On
over
our
the
own.
next course of the next week.
And we can submit those to Mr. Boucher.
Okay.
But what are we doing at the next meeting? We're doing middle school
Yeah.
English and at least one or two more things.
Yeah, I would nominate that we attempt to do middle school English. Actually, number 3, number 4.
Okay.
Number 3 and number 4
Okay.
would probably fill our agenda. By the way, number 3 is middle school English language arts adoption. Number 4 would be an update on competency-based grading.
Did you accept the motion?
Yes.
Motion to adjourn?
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we are
Time
adjourned.
is
7:30.
7:30. Right on the dot.
Right on the nose, good work.
Yeah.